Hi folks, Six Slices here. This is the this week's knife in the high-end series, and this is another Russian Cheburkov. This one is called the Russkiy, and it's available in various finishes, but this particular one is in a red-black carbon fibre, which is quite nice, reasonably subtle, not too in your face. There's some very garish carbon fibre going around these days. I think this one it's got a bit of colour, but it's subtle enough. It's my favourite of the Cheburkovs that I've seen so far. Even given that it is in a coloured carbon fibre and it has a Damascus blade, I like the shape of it. I like the way that it works. I like the way that they've designed it. These carbon fibre pieces are inlaid into the frame of the knife, but they are crowned and stand reasonably high, giving it a fairly sort of a beefy profile that way, but keeping the knife quite slim in this direction. So it's very pocketable, very nice knife to carry. Talking of pockets, we have a milled titanium pocket clip there. I'm not a big fan of milled titanium clips, but if you're going to have one like this, is probably about as good as they get. It's got a nice it's milled nice and thin in the bit where you need the flexibility to get it into your pocket, to get it in and out of your pocket, but a decent ramp here to slip over the edge of the cloth, and with this carbon fibre being quite smooth, it goes in nicely. We've got a back spacer here, so it's sort of partly open design, partly back spacer. At the bottom we've got a pin for a lanyard, which is quite nice, because if you don't want lanyards, it just kind of disappears. If you want to put a lanyard in, it's there. It's not just a crude hole in the thing. Now, if we move on to the sort of construction here, you'll see that it looks a bit like a liner lock, but really that liner is actually the frame of the knife. So it's really a frame lock, but with the carbon fibre covering up the frame from the outside. So I think it's almost the best of both worlds, because I've never been a big fan of frame locks, because you end up with this kind of pretty ugly bit around here. The original frame lock, I just think that just doesn't look great, whereas this keeps that nice and trim. Talking of keeping things trim, of course, it also has the relief for the frame lock bending is there, and it's on the inside of the knife rather than the outside, which is again something that I'm rather fond of. I would think it's a shame when you put it on the outside. I always wonder why. Now, in terms of the just before I open it, just one other thing on the tab here. It shows you, it's got the date that it was made, 2021, which is just on the flipper tab there. Flipper tab's got a little bit of jimping on the top. It's not the easiest flipper tab to use if you've got dodgy hands as I have, but it does have a good action. It flips open without any trouble, and it's very secure once it's done so. The steel on this is marked on the knife there, and it's ZDI 1016, which is a Russian Damascus steel. And we had another one in the first series of the Cheburkov with Damascus, and I thought it looked a little bit glitzy. It did look like Damascus steel, I have to say, but it's that kind of shiny chrome polished look that it had. This one I think is a much better quality looking Damascus. So I'm not a huge fan of Damascus, but if you're going to have it, this looks as good as probably any that I've seen so far, with the exception of that Sebenza that we had in the first group, which had a really nice Damascus. But this one looks quite nice. I like the blade shape here. You've got, I mean, you could call it a modified Warncliffe or whatever, but you've got a bit of enough belly in it, a little bit of straight here. It's almost full flat with just a short flat area at the top. So technically it's probably a saber grind, but I think in practice and use it's pretty much a flat ground knife, particularly as the flat part only comes to here, so all of this bit at the top here is all flat ground. A little bit of jumping on the back. As ever, it's not as nice as a Cheburkov or even a Chris Reeves for that matter. It always looks a little bit crude, but you know, I'd rather it didn't have any jumping at all. That would be my preference, but you know, it's good enough. And you've got the little Cheburkov symbol there just by my thumb. So in terms of shape in the hand, I actually really like this knife, and it feels nice. You don't have any of the can't say the ugliness of a frame lock around your sort of where your finger is there. It all just fits nicely. You can put your thumb on the top. You can do it in a pinch grip. You know, I could see this as your steak knife or whatever. That would work well. But it's quite big. Bigger. It's deceptively large, actually, I think. I'll just do some size comparisons just so you can see, and then we'll measure it. But this is the large Sebenza. Now the large Sebenza, you know, is a reasonably chunky knife, and I was surprised when I put these two side by side at just how big the Cheburkov is compared to the Sebenza. They're almost identical in terms of length, and although the Sebenza is broader, when you turn them over on their backs and you have a look at the thickness of them, you find that the Cheburkov is actually quite a bit thicker than the Sebenza. Partly it's because it's got a slightly thicker frame, and also it's because the crowned carbon fibre, I think, sticks up just a little bit further. So, but it is actually quite comparable in lengthwise, particularly with the large Sebenza. Just as well, I'll show you the small Sebenza briefly, just by way of comparison. Small Sebenza is much smaller, kind of dwarfed by it. But one that I would have said was a similar size, but actually turns out not to be at all, is the Benchmade Bug Out. And before I'd laid these side by side, I actually thought to myself that they were about the same size, because it kind of feels like it should be this size. It just carries kind of well like that, but it isn't actually large Sebenza size. And I'll just quickly give it a quick measure so you can see just how big that is in number terms. You're talking about an overall length there of about 8 3/4 inches. It's a fairly large size, and that gives us a blade size of about 3 5/8, something like that. I think the official numbers set it at, in millimeters, they say that the overall length is 219 millimeters with a blade length of 95 millimeters, which is 4 millimeters longer than my large Rockstead, for example. It's fairly thick stock. That's one thing, I suppose. It's 3.9 millimeters thick, but it does come down to a nice, reasonably fine edge. And so I think it can cut. And I suppose finally, in terms of price, this is not a cheap knife. But if you were comparing it, say, with the large Sebenza again, it's probably about £100 cheaper than the large Sebenza. It's half the price of a comparable Cheburkov, coming in at around the £500 mark. I think it's €444 on Lamni, or at least it was out of stock. But you've got to add VAT to that, so it's going to bring it in just over the £500 mark. And it's not cheap, and but I think that's probably quite good value for money as these things go. I think you're getting quite a lot of knife and quite a lot of innovation and quite a lot of style and so forth for the money. I mean, it does have a good action. There's almost not enough room to do this under the camera, but it does, just with not too much persuasion. Full shot. You give it a wee shake, it doesn't just drop, but that's partly because it's a relatively lightweight blade. So anyway, I think that is about enough for this. If you like the stuff, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more of these next week and then again and thereafter, then please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. Thank you. Bye.